everybody, and this is Falguni Y Parekh. I'm a solicitor. I advise on UK immigration and nationality laws. I specialize in advising for the last 15 years. I've had thousands of clients um, in 26 countries. I've represented them in their applications, and I think this is a wonderful time of the year. Love is in the air. It is, and if you're still apart, I I think it is very disheartening. I know the long distance relationship can be very difficult, and that's where we thought that let us answer the most commonly asked questions when you want to join your partner, your spouse, your fiance in the UK. And we took this opportunity to address to the most commonly asked questions that I kind of hear from our clients almost in all my consultations where I'm advising them. And I will run through these questions today with you, and you can stay in tune to follow up the responses, and perhaps you'll get your answers as well, and that can help you to go ahead with your application and join your partners in the UK. So here I go. The most frequently asked question. I think this is what I have been asked very, very often. And I am really happy to sort of have this opportunity to discuss this with you. The question here is, my husband works in the UK, so it could be husband or spouse in the UK, and he has a skilled worker visas. I want to apply for a spouse visa. This is a question which is for sure a confusing response from the perspective of whoever is asking, because when your partner or your spouse in the UK have a visa status which is of a skilled worker, you do not apply for spouse visas. You do not apply for spouse visas. You only apply for spouse visas if your partner or your husband or your spouse in the UK has indefinite leave to remain in the UK or a British nationality. So if they have one of these, is only then you apply for spouse. I think it's very disappointing when you're not being assessed correctly under the right category. Of seeing clients making an application all the way there and then getting refused simply with a statement that says this is a wrong category under which you made an application, and there's a loss of fee that you've paid which is non-refundable, and there's loss of time. You've got a refusal which creates an adverse immigration history, and it's not an ideal scenario to go all the way there and apply under the wrong category. So vice versa, your if your partner or your spouse in the UK has a British nationality or has got an indefinite leave to remain in UK, you cannot apply as a dependent. So I hope it helps. I hope it's clarified that you need to do your assessment correctly. You need to know which category of visas have you to make an application. So the response to this particular question is to say you shouldn't be applying for spouse at all. You have to apply for a dependent visas because your husband is on a skilled worker visa in the UK. The next question that I have, which is again very frequently been asked amongst them, is, my wife and I are Indian, but she lives in the UK for work purposes. Can I apply for UK spouse visa to live with her in the UK? Again, similar situation. I'm not sure at times when I'm being put on hearing questions like this. I'm not sure when you say your wife or your partner or your spouse is in the UK for work purposes, have they got a limited rights to be in the UK, or have they already reached to a stage where they've got indefinite leave to remain in UK, or they've got a British nationality already, or they're in a process. They could be in a stage where they've got indefinite leave to remain in UK. They may be in process of doing naturalization applications or making an application for a British passport. So there is a very fine lines here, unless there is a specific sort of an information which tells you very clearly on what is the immigration status of the sponsor in the UK, what is the tenure of their visas in the UK, and are they in the process, because sometimes they would be in the process of applying for naturalizations or British passport, etc. Then we need to really do an assessment correctly. If you are in one of such situation, my advice is, please speak to somebody who is qualified to advise you, somebody who is more experienced, somebody who can correctly kind of give you guidance on how you have to do it. Because at times, when you're referring to the online, the gov.uk, very helpful. It's very detailed website and it does tell you about the requirements. But your situation, your personal circumstances cannot be, are not at times being described there, and therefore it's very pertinent that you speak to somebody qualified and experienced to advise on what is the right category that you should be applying for. So, for now, my assumption is for this particular question that your spouse has limited rights to work in the UK, perhaps, then you can apply as a dependent. However, if your spouse has been working for very long and could be qualifying for an indefinite leave to remain in UK, or may be in a process to apply for one, then you need to kind of speak to somebody to be sure that you're applying for the correct category of visas. Right. The next question that I get, and yeah, it is a bit funny, but I think it's very important to deal in with. So this question is again very recently that I was being reached out by one of the clients asking, can I get married over the video call? I think we are in this day and age where it's very easy to get connected, and sometimes the circumstances that we are into, the personal and professional circumstances, it's very difficult to travel, take leave, and you're determined to get married, you're determined to be together. It's wonderful, and I wish it was possible. So I'll come back to the question. It says, can I get married over a video call? My fiance is in the UK and is scared of flights, which I understand that sometimes people are. I want to marry him over a call and then apply for a spouse visa to go to the UK. Oh, so much that I agree that at times it is difficult, and people may have they have the phobia of flying. Sometimes it could also be the medical condition that the sponsor could be into, and you would want to do it over the phone, get married over the phone, get married on a video call. Uh, but unfortunately, the law does not permit us to accept that your this particular marriage will unfortunately will not be accepted, and therefore we kind of advise you to enter in as a fiance, yeah, and maybe then try to switch your status, and you can do that is once you get married in the UK, you can then switch your status to spouse. So that could be another way to do it. But if you kind of try to do a spouse visa that over for a marriage that has happened over a video, that unfortunately will not be accepted and would get refused. So I wouldn't recommend that there. Um, the next question I'm being asked is, how much maintenance funds are required to qualify for spouse visas? Um, the terminologies that are being in existence for different categories that are in existence um, for the partners or spouses or to join um, in the UK are very many, and there are very fine lines which distinguishes one from the other, and therefore one has to be very mindful of. Um, when we speak about maintenance funds and spouse visas, unfortunately, that's not the term that the Home Office is using. Um, there is no maintenance funds as such. You are required to meet financial requirements, and this financial requirement is absolutely an appendix which is quite lengthy, it's quite detailed, and gives various scenario based that your sponsor could be into. Your sponsor can be employed, your sponsor can be self employed, uh, they can be receiving income from other sources like dividend, interest, etc. There could be cash saving routes. There could be a combination of routes that you could take in depending upon your circumstances. You have to meet the financial requirements when applying for spouse visas. However, if you apply as a dependent, then you have a maintenance requirements. That's where you have a specific amount being put up to be maintained in your bank account for a period of 90 days to do an application. So that's where you require maintenance funds. But coming back, if you're applying as a spouse, you need £18,600 earnings per annum in the UK for your applicant, for your partner to make a valid application. So again, I'm not sure when questions are just been asked to say what is the maintenance funds and you're applying for spouse because there is no maintenance funds. And this is slightly different because when you're maintaining, you have a particular amount and then you hold that amount for a period of time, which qualifies you to do an application, and that's maintenance funds requirement being met. But for financial requirements being met, you have to demonstrate that your partner, your spouse, your sponsor in the UK are earning £18,600, or as I said, then there are various other permutation combinations that can happen, which is you can have cash savings or you can combine incomes. But then again, there are some incomes you cannot combine. So if you think that, you're not confident about the whole interpretation of your circumstances to the published guidance notes, I strongly recommend please to take an advice from qualified professionals who can guide you and assist you to and give and can navigate you to say what could be the right way of looking into this particular requirement here. Uh, the next question that I'm being asked is, my wife is British citizen and we have a son who is also British citizen. That's very nice. Okay. And I want to live with them in the UK. However, presently, I'm not in my home country. How can I apply for spouse visas? Um, yes, and as you see, as I'm reading the questions, you would realize that, there's so much of different case-based scenario. Everybody would be in a different situation, and there would be something very unique about their particular case, and then we're trying to assess on how do you do the application. To answer this question here, if you're not in your home country, then I'm assuming hypothetically that you are in some other country where you're there because you have taken up a job, you are in an employment, or you for business purpose, you have a set business in that country, or you have a residence permit in this other country, then you can make an application from whichever other country that you are into, which is not your home country. Now, if you are, say, as a visitor in one of those countries, which is not your home country, and then you're trying to make an application here, this is where the authorities would not be able to accept your application because then they will ask the applicant to go back to their home country and then apply from there. So, sometimes randomly we receive calls and, emails from the clients just giving us only this bit of an information. But it's hard to advise because you need to really know on why are you in some other country. I mean, what is your reason to be in that country? So as I explained, if you're only as a tourist, then you probably wouldn't be permitted to make an application from there. But if you do, are you working there, then you cannot really leave your job and go back to your home country just because you want to apply for visas. And an ideal situation is to permit you to apply from that particular country, which is not your home country, and go ahead with your application. So the next question that again are sometimes complex situations that the applicants and sponsors are into, and one of the situation here is I'm divorced from my previous marriage and have child too with my ex-husband, but now I want to live in the UK with my fiance who is self-employed in the UK. How do I meet the financial requirement? Right. Um, I think one question for sure of all of this I can say is yes, you can make an application. However, with your fiance who is particularly self-employed, this particular uh, requirement, which is a financial requirement under the settlement category of spouse visas, is a bit complex. I would always encourage and strongly recommend to to have to have an assessment being done again with somebody who's professional, experienced, and qualified to understand, because the self-employed route also needs to dem- to prove that the sponsor in the UK is earning £18,600 per annum, and within this, there's a very long list of documents that you need to provide. Really, really long list of documents. I mean, I've been in practice for the last 15 years, but even to date, I kind of want to double check when I'm doing self-employed application to make sure that everything that's in the list is been provided for, because at the end of the day, the onus is on the applicant to prove their case. It's not upon the assessing officer to come and ask you on for the document. So you have to make sure that you've given sufficient evidence, documentary evidences, to qualify for the financial requirement. And self-employment is here a tricky bit, which needs to be carefully being done so that you're not being refused, because the after effects of it is, you get a refusal, you have to go through the appeal process. It's very time consuming and takes very long to get an outcome from appeals, almost a year. And I think it's kind of a lot of anxiety again till you get through with your appeals, and the waiting period especially is very, very daunting, and the part that you have to stay apart from each other. I think that's a very difficult time for both applicant and the sponsor. Um, so I really encourage you for if you have a sponsor or partners in the UK who are self-employed, to make sure that we are able to clearly demonstrate the earning of £18,600, but more than that, we are able to provide all the documentary evidence as are listed in the Home Office requirements to qualify. So be careful with that one. Okay, the next question that I get, and this is really sweet to say, can you find a partner for me who is a British person? I'm single and unmarried. Oh, no, I'm a lawyer, and this is an immigration firm. I cannot assist you to find a partner. You need to find a partner by yourself. And it's strange. You know how love can happen in a very strange ways, and one can never predict on where would you find your soulmate. It could be within your own country, or it could just surprise you by being in a very different part of the world altogether. So yeah, the lawyers or the law firms, not me, but most of them would not be able to find partners for you. All right. What is the processing time of spouse visa? And really grateful for asking this, because um, the processing time has changed now. And if you're doing from out country, that is from outside of the UK, it's almost taking you 24 weeks to hear from the authority. So it's taking them a little longer to make a decision, and it's a long time. I understand it's a long time uh, till you get to hear from them. And therefore, here again, it's very important that you do it correctly, because when you've done your application, you've paid an application fee, which are a bit on the higher side compared to the other categories, and the wait period. So just make sure that you've done that right. What can I do if my spouse visa gets refused? Hmm, I hope not. I hope not. But if it does, you have to make an appeal. Within 28 days, you have to lodge your grounds of appeal, and then you have to go to the entire appeal proceedings up over there, which can take you nearly about 6 months to a year when you go through the appeal process. And therefore, just be very careful. We're not going that stage. I think, to me, I'll always look into doing an application as correctly as is possible, so that as soon as you launch in, um, and you should get a favorable outcome. So you've double checked, you've assessed correctly, given them correct documentary evidences, you've explained your case properly, and done everything in your end to make sure that you're qualifying to get through with your visas. And I hope there's no opportunity to go through the appeal processes. How long do you have to be married to apply for spouse visas? Now you could be just married, could just have found each other, and you could apply. You don't have to know for them. The only thing that you've thought through, when you're getting married, you have to make sure that you've taken time to know each other before you make this important decision to be with each other forever. Um, can my other wife also apply for spouse visa to join me in the UK? No, not unless you've dissolved your first marriage. You need to have your degree, the divorce decree, and then is when you are when you're permitted to remarry. So not that. I want to apply for a spouse visa. However, my partner is already applying for another country's spouse visa. What can be done? Difficult decision. I think you need to decide which country do you want to make your home, and which country is a place where you both want to spend your time together, spend your life together. So, so you need to make that decision with your partner. And with this, I hope I'm able to answer most of your questions. If you have any other comments, you have a query, you can leave them in the comment box below. And thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that you and your partners and your spouse, if they are in the UK, are able to join in. And hope this live has helped you and got responses for your kind of a situation as well. All the very best to everyone in your application. Thank you very much for joining us. Take care. Bye bye.